Rival forces refused to negotiate after 6 days of fighting in Sudan, despite UN calls for an immediate ceasefire.
NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg maintains that Ukraine will become an alliance member as defence leaders gather in Germany to discuss further military support.
The EU's top court has halved the daily €1 million fine imposed on Poland over its controversial judicial reforms.
Gunfire and explosions across Khartoum, but also reports of fighting across Sudan as the two sides in the conflict refuse to negotiate. Sudan's military ruler Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemedti, who leads the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, said they're unwilling to negotiate with each other. Nearly 330 civilians have been killed and thousands more injured since the fighting erupted on Saturday. 20,000 have fled their homes. US diplomats remain in the city.
Our team in Khartoum, we remain in close contact with them. To our understanding, they are safe.
The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate truce of 3 days for the end of Ramadan. It's hoped this could be the first step towards a permanent ceasefire.
To reaffirm unity and our resolve, US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin said this is the goal of Friday's widely anticipated meeting at the Ramstein Air Base in Germany. NATO members and partners are expected to discuss strengthening military aid to Ukraine to halt Russia's invasion of the country. Upon arrival, Alliance Chief Jens Stoltenberg returned to the issue of Ukraine's membership.
I said in Kiev yesterday that Ukraine's future is in the Euro-Atlantic family, and all NATO allies have agreed that Ukraine will become a NATO member. But the main focus now is, of course, on how to ensure that Ukraine prevails.
While Ukrainian President Zelensky said he was grateful for the support, he stressed that safety guarantees are needed and confirmation on when Ukraine will be a NATO member.
Ані більшість українців, ані більшість європейців, ані більшість мешканців усього простору НАТО не зрозуміють лідерів Альянсу, якщо на цьому саміті у Вільнюсі не прозвучить заслужене політичне запрошення для України до Альянсу. Україна все зробила для того, щоб наша заявка була задоволена.
US officials said 31 Abrams tanks will arrive in Germany at the end of May, and hundreds of Ukrainian troops will be taught how to operate and repair them. Training is expected to last 10 weeks before a similar number of refurbished tanks are transported to Ukraine.
Moscow has admitted one of its military aircraft mistakenly bombed the Russian city of Belgorod, just over the border from Ukraine. The country's Ministry of Defence claimed that ammunition accidentally broke loose from the plane. The regional governor said there were no fatalities reported, but at least 3 people were injured.
Сразу удар, я подскакиваю, меня прямо так вверх. Я выбегаю, эти уже сидят на полу. Мои родственники.
Слышен гул, похож на реактивный самолет, может быть, или, я не знаю, я не специалист в этом, я думаю, что люди разберутся. Но стены дрожали.
The city was rocked by at least 2 explosions. Some residential buildings were damaged and cars overturned, according to the RIA Novosti news agency. Police and emergency workers were called out, and local authorities offered temporary accommodation in hotels to residents affected by the blasts. A court in Russia has decided a schoolgirl who drew an anti-war drawing can stay with her family. 13-year-old Maria Moskaleva drew a picture at school last spring that carried the slogan, "Glory to Ukraine." The image set off procedures that resulted in her father being sentenced in his absence to 2 years in prison just over 3 weeks ago for discrediting the Russian army. He fled, but has since been caught by authorities in Belarus. The father and daughter have repeatedly criticised the Russian invasion of Ukraine on the internet and at her school, drawing attention to the killing of civilians. At the start of the investigation, the teenage girl was seized from her single father and sent to an orphanage. Authorities have now decided they no longer have concerns about Maria being raised by her mother.
On the eve of World Earth Day, the UN's World Meteorological Association has issued an alarming new report. It says in 2022, more than half the oceans experienced at least one marine heat wave and glaciers shrank. The average global temperature for the year was 1.15 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels.
Today's policies would make our world 2.8 degrees hotter by the end of the century. And this is a death sentence. We need global acceleration through cooperation. And that means rising above disagreements, differences and tensions. Geopolitical divisions must not torpedo the world's climate fight for 1.5 degrees.
Developed countries have promised zero emissions by 2040, emerging economies by 2050. Europe had its hottest summer ever in 2022. Droughts persist this year, with Copernicus data showing a quarter of the European continent and Mediterranean basin affected. And that's despite European investment in greener energy alternatives.
The EU's top court has halved the daily €1 million fine imposed on Poland over its controversial judicial reforms. Brussels says Warsaw has implemented most of the steps required by the European Court of Justice, which has so far seen Poland lose more than €500 million in its battle with the European Commission.
La collection des fines a commencé le 3 novembre 2021. Ça, c'est le premier jour où cette amende était due. Jusqu'à hier, tu peux compter maintenant, c'était une amende de 1 million et depuis aujourd'hui, ça a été changé de le vice-président de la Cour pour une demi-million.
The EU institutions have been at odds with the Conservative Polish government over its reform to the judiciary, which the Commission says endanger its independence. One outstanding issue is the so-called disciplinary chamber, a body which has the power to sanction judges. The EU's top court has previously ruled that this is illegal, saying that Warsaw must dismantle the chamber. The daily fine was issued after Poland refused to implement the ruling. More solidarity among EU member states in managing migratory pressure. That's the goal of the European Parliament after approving on Thursday 3 key proposals on migration that aim to end the years-long standoff between EU member states on how to deal with the issue. The principle of the so-called Dublin regulation, which means that every asylum seeker coming to Europe should present their request in the country of first entry, remains valid, but with more exceptions like the family or educational ties of migrants. According to MEPs, though, solidarity between EU countries should be expressed in different ways.
Well, it's binding to make sure that every member state contribute, but then what we offer from the European Parliament is that we should have flexible options, that we will see some member states that will work with relocation, others might work with capacity building. And this is because we want to open up the deadlock that we have seen for years, because something needs to happen now.
The vote by MEPs establishes the European Parliament's stance in negotiations on the issue with the EU Council. If the Parliament gets its way, physical relocations would still apply under normal circumstances, but would become binding when a member state calls it a crisis situation. The Commission would then have to assess the crisis request and, if confirmed, set quotas of migrants to be deployed to the other countries.
Solidarity may have a chance. Solidarity when it comes to emergency crisis situations. That's precisely the point of this regulation.
Mandatory relocation is a key point for Mediterranean countries like Italy, which has this year seen a 300% increase of migrants by sea. The system of voluntary relocations which is currently in place has not worked well. And despite several thousand pledges, only a few hundred people have so far been transferred from Italy to other member states. Negotiations between the Parliament and Council are unlikely to be easy, given the years of tension.
La crainte principale dans la négociation avec les conseils, c'est qu'au lieu de mettre en avant les mécanismes de solidarité entre les États membres dans l'accueil et de l'intégration, on privilégie l'approche sécuritaire qui va mener à une augmentation de la détention et l'accélération des procédures de retour.
EU governments will push hard for the aspects related to the external dimension of migration, like the screening of migrants at borders and leverage that can be used against countries of origin for their return.
Some 1.8 billion Muslims around the world are celebrating the Eid al-Fitr holiday, marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan. In the Gaza Strip, after prayers, hundreds of protesters chanted slogans in support of the Islamic militant group Hamas and burned Israeli flags, following weeks of rising tensions in Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank. In Baghdad, worshippers flocked to the Abu Hanifa Mosque to pray.
نتمنى الشعب العراقي والأمة الإسلامية أجمع أن يعم الأمن والأمان والسلامة والصحة إن شاء الله ويبعد عنا الفتن والمشاكل إن شاء الله وكل عام والجميع إن شاء الله بخير.
Families went to the Martyrs Cemetery.
صلاة العيد دائما نجي نزور أهلنا وموتانا في مقبرة الأعظمية وندعي من هذا اليوم الفضيل الكريم الرحمة والغفران لهم.
The Islamic community of Bosnia and Herzegovina celebrated Eid at the Gazi Huzrev Bey Mosque in Sarajevo. The celebrations usually last 3 days. The Islamic community will celebrate Martyrs' Day on Saturday at the Kovaci Cemetery in Sarajevo.